Welcome to the 7th round of the World Chess Championship match between Jan Nepomniachtchi from Russia and Liren from China. The match is evenly poised at this point, with both players having 3 points each after 6 rounds, and the winner of this match will be the new World Chess Champion. Jan is white, Ding is black. White started e4, black played e6, which is already a surprise. Ding Liren has rarely played French defense in his life, so Jan must definitely have not expected this move. White played d4, black played d5, and white played knight d2, which is the Tarrasch variation against the French defense. Tarrasch is named after the German player Siegfried Tarrasch, who was one of the leading players of the previous century. Well, the idea behind this move is to support the e4 pawn while keeping the c pawn free so that it can be used to strengthen the d4 pawn, and white later would build up a very strong center by advancing the e pawn, where the c3 pawn would play a very important role in defending the d4 pawn. Well, and talking about the presence of knight on d2 and the c1 bishop, which is blocked by the knight, well, the knight on d2 would move to either e4 or f3 or b3 in future. So it's on a temporary square d2. The c1 bishop will develop gradually. Here black played c5. He challenged white's center. White played knight gf3. He developed his knight. He could have played ed5, which is the more common move in this position. Black usually replies either with ed5, which opens the c8 bishop's diagonal. It frees black position, but at the cost of a potential weak pawn on d5, which may be isolated after black's c5 and white's d4 pawns are exchanged. Or black can continue with queen d5. Black's queen gets exposed, but at least white's knight cannot chase the queen by playing knight c3, since it has already developed via d2. So these are the two main lines which are usually played against the Tarrasch. But here white opted for simple piece development with knight f3, and black captured on d4. White took back, and black played knight f6, attacking the e4 pawn. Here white again kept the game very simple by capturing on d5 instead of advancing e5. Well, here black, it's a normal French position where white advances the pawn and black pressurizes the e5 pawn with his knights, and later he would play a move like f6, challenging the e5 pawn and opening his f file for the rook. But instead, once again, white kept the game quite simple. He took ed5, black took back with the knight, and white brought out his knight and opened the diagonal for his bishop. Here black developed, white brought out his bishop from c4, black played knight c6. Here white captured on c6, and after black played pawn takes knight, we have a very nice imbalance in the position. Black has split pawns, that means slightly weak pawn structure, where he has 3 pawn islands, 4 pawns cluster on the king side, and a lone pawn on c file and a file. Compared to that, white has only 2 pawn islands. His pawns are more compact, and we can say white has a slightly better pawn structure. However, black has an extra central pawn, which is good for black. So we can say both the sides have reasons to be happy. And after the further castles by both sides, white played Queen e2. Here, black took 17 minutes to decide on his next move. So this is a very important moment of the game, where black took the decision whether to develop the bishop through this diagonal by advancing his pawn to e5. Of course, it needs support, so black may have to play something like f6 and e5, or maybe queen c7 e5, or black would opt for bishop b7 and c5. So here black opted for bishop b7, but for this black took precious 17 minutes of his time, and perhaps these were the reasons why black fell in acute time pressure later in the game. White played bishop d3. Black could have played c5 immediately, opening the diagonal for the bishop, but here, although this is a desirable move, but here it is a very instructive mistake. White would then play queen e4 with a very instructive double attack. He attacks h7, threatening checkmate, and he threatens c4, attacking the d5 knight, which cannot move because the b7 bishop would be captured by white. For instance, if black defends his checkmate by playing g6, white could play c4, and wherever the knight goes, if it goes to say b6, white could capture b7, and if black captures d3, white could capture the e7 bishop and would be a piece up. Here after c4, if black goes knight b4, again white could capture the b7 bishop, and now against queen d3, white captures the e7 bishop. Once again white is a piece up. White is having an absolutely winning position. But if black captures knight d3, here we have equal pieces, but then the knight on d3 could be pinned by white's pieces. White could play rook to d1, which pins the knight. The queen cannot move, the knight cannot move, and later white could increase pressure upon this knight by playing queen e4 or queen b3, or even knight e1, and win the knight on d3 with an absolutely winning position. So c5 looks good, but actually it's a mistake. Therefore black first played queen c7, protecting his b7 bishop and preparing to play c5. White played queen e4, threatening checkmate. Black retreated, protecting h7 and attacking e4. White went queen h4. So he moved his queen away from attack, keeping an eye on h7 pawn. So this knight on f6 is by and large tied down to defense of h7 pawn. Here black played c5. Black took 21 minutes for this move. So he is losing a lot of time playing obvious move and taking decisions, and these were the reasons perhaps for which he fell in time pressure and later in the game fell into trouble. Here white played bishop f4. Well, I would like to discuss a very important plan which arises in similar positions. That is, white could have played bishop g5, threatening to remove the defender of h7 pawn. So here white threatens to capture bishop f6 and then play queen h7 checkmate. Well, black usually plays h6 in this position, because he cannot play g6, he will lose the knight for free. Therefore, h6 is a move which is played by black in these positions. And here we discuss a very instructive sacrifice which is usually possible in these positions. That is, white can actually capture bishop h6, and after g h6, white captures queen h6. So what has happened? White has sacrificed his bishop for 2 pawns, and his queen is quite close to the black king, and the queen is indirectly backed up by his knight and the bishops, which will move dangerously close to black's king. Well, at this point, black is well defended, but white has ripped apart black's king position, and he is planning to attack the black king. Black has many defenses. He can play c4, or he can play rook fd8. Against a move like c4, white does best to repeat the position by playing queen g5 check. When white goes king h8, white would repeat by playing queen h6 check, forcing black to go king g8, and we have a draw. Against a move like rook fd8, white could once again play queen g5 check, and now black king can escape via e8, but then white has bishop b5 check, and he has 2 pawns for a piece and a very good possibility to attack the exposed black king. So therefore the move bishop g5 was very interesting. However, black does have defense, and there was a very interesting move here. Instead of defending the h7 pawn, which is the obvious idea, black could have played a very interesting move, sacrificing the h7 pawn. And this is an idea which I would like to point out. That is, white can actually win the h7 pawn and come dangerously close to black's king, but the king escapes. Black is a pawn down, and the king is ready to escape from e7. In this position, surprisingly, although black is a pawn down and his king seems to be more exposed, but it is actually black who is calling the shots, because black's bishops are doing a great job. They are on great diagonals, both the bishops, and is threatening to actually fracture the white's king position by capturing on f3. So if white plays something like bishop e4, preventing black from capturing on f3, then black can, after the exchange of the bishops, he can actually recover the pawn on b2, and this position seems to be quite good for black because pawns are equal and black has a very useful bishop on b2 in an open position, which can give black a really good game. So bishop g5 was an option, but black is quite satisfied. Black had satisfactory defense against bg5. Therefore, white opted for a more modest move, bishop f4, attacking the queen. The queen moved to b6, and again black consumed another 5 precious minutes before making this obvious move. White played knight e5. He centralized his piece, and this is another very instructive moment of the game. Well, where to place our rooks? Now, since both white and black have developed all their pieces, now they have to think of deploying their rooks on open files. So how to develop the rooks? Black has, the most obvious move is rook fd8, placing the rook on d file and then going for something like rook b8 or rook c8 and grabbing useful files with both the rooks. Unfortunately, against this move, white can play bishop h7 check, sacrificing the bishop, but then capturing the bishop on e7 and thus being one pawn up. Here the unfortunate position of the rook on d8 lets the f7 pawn be weak. White is threatening queen f7 check, and white is not only a pawn up, but he is also having a very good attacking chance. Therefore, black, instead of playing rook fd8, opted for rook a d8, keeping support of f7 pawn. Now if black plays, bishop h7 check with the same idea, black would capture the bishop and queen e7, white is still one pawn up, but since the pawn on f7 is defended, black can play knight f6. And here the white queen is in trouble. Now the queen doesn't have many squares to escape. A sample variation would be white could play bishop e3, threatening the c5 pawn, after which black could capture queen b2, and against rook a b1, skewering the queen and the bishop, black could capture e5, white would capture on b7, and here black has a very nice move, that is knight g4, threatening checkmate on h2 as well as capturing the e3 bishop with a good position. So after rook a d8, the move bishop h7 is a mistake. White played rook a e1. Even white's decision to play the a1 to e1 is slightly surprising, because he could have played rook f e1 instead. But in many variations, white needs support of f2 pawn, as we'll see later, and also white had a very interesting plan of advancing the f pawn. For that reason, he preferred to keep the rook on f1. After rook a e1, black played g6, perhaps freeing the f6 knight from defense of h7. So he played g6, and white played bishop g5, attacking the f7 knight. Here white played rook d4 instantly. So after thinking for a long time in the previous moves, now black played this move quite quickly. White played queen h3, black played queen c7. So this move is also quite good. He is putting pressure on e5 knight. White played the move b3, which I like a lot because it stabilizes the position of this bishop and it prevents black from pushing c4 in future. The other move which was considered by the masters who were analyzing this game was the move c3, where black would retreat to d5 with his rook. But this move is not so effective because it leaves the d3 bishop slightly vulnerable to black's future moves, and black could play a move like c4 in future and penetrate into white's position. For instance, if white plays f4 now, black could consider even sacrificing a pawn by playing c4. If white takes on c4, black's rook could invade on d2. And if black plays something like knight c4, white plays knight c4, black could play rook d8, and he would have an excellent counter-attack because the bishop on d3 is unprotected. So c4 pawn sacrifice is very good, especially because it also vacates the c5 square for the bishop. And from c5, the bishop would have access to a very good diagonal, and another bishop from b7 also is occupying a very nice diagonal. So this was a very interesting pawn sacrifice after c3. Therefore, white preferred to stabilize the position by playing b3, ruling out black's c4 sacrifices. Here, black played knight h5, which is a very good move because he wants to exchange this bishop, after which the knight would invade on f4 square, attacking the queen, attacking g2 with the help of the bishop on b7. So the move knight h5 is a very useful move. White played a very surprising move, that is f4. Now this position is very instructive. White is provoking black to play bishop g5, after which white will capture fg5, and he has a strong hold on these two squares. These squares are unprotected by black's pawns. So by putting his pawn to g5, white lays claim to those squares. The tactical point behind this move is black could actually play knight f4, attacking the queen and the pawn. The knight is supported by the rook. Here white would play queen h6, and after knight g2 he could play bishop to g6, a brilliant move with the idea that this f pawn is pinned, and if black takes with the h pawn, white could still capture the g6 with his knight, and again the f pawn is pinned. Black cannot take fg6 because there is rook f8 checkmate. Otherwise white is threatening queen h8 checkmate. So this was one of the ideas behind white's creative move f4. Black cannot capture bishop g5. So black played bishop d6, which is a very interesting move. Black is putting pressure on e5 knight, and he is planning to actually undermine the knight by capturing the defender of the knight on f4. Here white played c3, chasing the rook away. Well, and here we have a very critical moment of the game. Black went for complications. He played knight f4, attacking the queen instead. White took bishop f4. Now this is a very complicated position. The students who wish to improve their power of calculation and imagination may pause the video here and work out the variations by themselves. Here even a world champion contender missed that rook f4 was actually better than bishop f4, because here black could capture bishop e5. Material is even, but white has a fantastic resource, that is, he could capture on g6 with his bishop. What is the idea behind this capture? Well, white basically takes on g6. His aim is, if black captures fg6, he will move his attacked rook on f4 with a tempo. He will play rook f8, king f8, and then he will capture the black rook, and he will be an exchange up. So bishop g6 basically aims to move his f4 rook with gain of time, and right now white is threatening queen h7. So black has to play something like hg6, but even here white can capture the rook, and when black captures the f4 rook, white will have bishop f6. Note that the h file is cleared and white is threatening queen h8 checkmate. So it was a fantastic move, bishop g6, and it would have been possible only if white captured the f4 with his rook. Instead, white played bishop f4. Black took rook f4, white took rook f4, and black played bishop e5. So here black is an exchange down, but he has one extra pawn for the exchange. This position is very interesting because it is one of such positions where black's bishop on e5 is actually better than white's rook on f4. It not only threatens white's pawns, but it plays a very important role in defense, as well as it has a very nice diagonal all over the board. So the bishop on e5 is centralized, and black has an extra pawn in the center. So he has very good chances to play for long-term advantage. And white, although he's an exchange up, he doesn't have many constructive ideas in this position. So let's see how the game proceeded. It was a very nice exchange sacrifice by black. White played rook h4, moving the rook away from attack and threatening rook h7. Black calmly played rook d8. Now if white captures on h7, black would take on d3, and note that the bishop on e5 is actually controlling the h8 square. So it is a very good defender as well as attacker. So here the queen on h3 is overloaded. It cannot capture the rook because then the support of h7 rook will be gone. So here black is winning. Therefore, after rook d8, white moved his bishop to c4, e4 to exchange the bishops. And here black could have avoided the exchange. In this position, potentially black has a very strong pawn ruler advancing, supported by the two bishops. So black could consider moving his bishop away and playing bishop a6 so that he could move his e5 bishops, paving the way for pawn advance, and that would be really a good position for black. Instead, he captured on e4, and one has the feeling that around this time Liren was running short of time and he was quite unsure of his moves. Till this point black played quite well, but bishop e4 is a small positional mistake because it allows white's rook to get to a good square. Here black played rook d5, defended the bishop, and also planning to take complete control over the d file. In this way, white will not be able to exchange the rooks, and white's rooks will not have access to any open file. White played rook h4, threatening h7. Black played queen d6 first. Now this is another very nice move because the black rook actually is planning to penetrate, to invade here or play rook d3, winning the c3 pawns. So white played queen e3 at this point, and black played h5. This is a useful move because he moves his pawn to, well, this is another very important point to note, that all the pawns, most of the pawns on the king side on the light squares, so these pawns do not restrict black's bishop, and basically these pawns makes the rook look quite silly because the rook doesn't have any open files. Here white played g3. Well, this move is quite a good move because it restricts the e5 bishop, and since both the players were running short of time, especially black had less than 10 minutes to make the remaining 10 moves, He was taking some time. He was trying to be sure of what to play. He played bishop f6, attacking the rook. The rook went to c4, while keeping pressure on c5 square. And here, well, black could keep on improving his position. Although white is an exchange up, he doesn't have so many nice plans. Because, for instance, if he tries to advance his b pawn, if black plays a slightly improving move like king g7 and white plays something like b4, he runs into problems on this diagonal. So white cannot afford to move his pawn away from c3 square. Therefore, white would lack plans to achieve something immediately, and the position, although it's equal, but it's more pleasant to play for black. Here, black went for an aggressive move h4. He consumed a lot of time and he played h4 with an idea of softening up these pawns so that the bishop could actually play much better. It could gain access to good diagonal. And here white took gh4. So h4 was a pawn sacrifice. So this was a highly committal move. Black still has good position, but he has to play accurate moves. So it is over here that black simply froze. He kept on thinking, and finally he had few seconds on his clock, and he had 8 moves to make before he would get fresh time. So he had 8 moves. It was 32nd move by this time, and after 40th move black would get some increment, some extra time. So he had only a few seconds to make the remaining 8 moves. And here he blundered, he panicked, he played rook d2, and this is a big mistake. He should have played bishop e5 instead, making use of this diagonal. So the previous move h4 was committal, but at least this is the most consistent move, making use of the fact that gh4 has opened this diagonal. The point being that the most natural defense by white, rook e2, runs into bishop h2 check. This is a bishop sacrifice based on, if white plays rook h2, black will play rook d1 check and then skewer the king and rook. He will capture the rook with his queen in the next move and gain winning position. So the move bishop e5 was indeed the best move in this position, where black would have a very good counterplay. White may have to play something like queen to f2, and then black could play rook d2, rook e2, and rook d3. Well, black would have an excellent compensation for his exchange. Instead, the move played by black in this position was rook d2. White played rook e2. Black played rook d3, again blundering the c5 pawn. I don't know what exactly was thought by black. Maybe he simply panicked and made such mistakes because he had seconds to make decisions, or maybe he had thought of a surprising resource, that is bishop d4 check. It's bishop sacrifice. White can capture the bishop with his pawn. He cannot capture with his rook because that would leave the queen undefended. But if white captures the bishop with the pawn, black could play something like queen f4, threatening mating attack with rook d1. But unfortunately for black, white has the move queen e5 at this point. Sorry, white has the move queen to e5 at this point. Sorry. Yeah, there is some, yeah, queen e5 at this point, and it is not evident how black can checkmate white. White is a rook up. He can defend this position, and probably this is what black had missed while playing rook d3 and, well, sacrificing his pawns. So he lost all the pawns, and he played the move rook d1 check. Black played king g2. White played king g2, queen d3, attacking the rook. The rook moved to f2. All the checking squares are controlled by white's rooks. Black played king g7. White doubled the rooks on f file, and over here, well, this is a losing position for black because he's many pawns down and he's likely to lose the f7 pawn. Black played queen c3 and immediately resigned, because after queen c3, bishop c3, rook f7, white is winning his material up, his exchange up, his pawn up, and he should win the game comfortably. So this is how Ding Liren, having played so well in the whole game, having sacrificed an exchange and having got a very good compensation for the sacrifice, he panicked and he lost in time pressure. So what can we say about this game? Well, perhaps the time control, where the players do not have any increment after the moves, is one of the reasons why the players are panicking in this time control. Because in the last 20 years or so, in virtually every tournament, we have the system of increment. But in the World Championship match, after making a move, the players do not have this system of increment, and that may be one of the reasons why Ding Liren panicked in time pressure. So after this win, Yan takes the lead once again by 4 games to 3 at the halfway mark of the World Chess Championship. The game 8 starts after a rest day. There, Ding Liren will be white, Nepomniachtchi will be black, and we shall be back again with the highlights of Game 8 after 1 day break.